Hello. I want to talk about the Lindsay Clancy trial. And in just a short few minutes, I want to just talk about the drugs that Lindsay Clancy apparently was on. I've been trying to figure out the timeline. I don't understand how Lindsay could have gone through all that she went through. Okay. How many drugs were in her system is what I'm asking. Because I think Patrick actually killed the kids, okay? That's my theory. I'm going on the theory that Patrick is the murderer and he had to have drugged Lindsay to make this work. Now, this is the interesting thing that I have discovered about Lindsay's medications. One of the doctors testified that she was on a drug that is called, don't mind me, I'm not a doctor, I'm going to try to say this, amitriptyline, okay? And apparently this is the medication that was originally supposed to be 10 milligrams, and on January 23rd, the dose became 20 milligrams. So that's the drug that was actually doubled. She did not take Seroquel. Okay, so this is what's interesting. I'm wondering if Patrick drugged her earlier, it still has to get into her system. Okay, and how does she go? She must have been blacking out on any level with this if she was drugged. She doesn't really have proper memory from this. And if somebody really did this in the house, she would have to have been totally out. And how long? Because there's too narrow a window for this to really be happening. Okay, with respect to when you look at the whole timeline. So I'm suspecting she has been sedated or drugged earlier, and let's remember there is a wine tumbler in Lindsay's room that had unidentified crushed powders in it that Patrick declared must have been one thing or another, but were never ever verified by police what was in the tumbler. So this is what's interesting. It's not Seroquel that she was on. When I'm reading through this, Seroquel was supposed to be off her list. She was supposed to be on this amitriptyline. So I want to know what happens with amitriptyline if you're taking it. It can be very sedating, and it can definitely cause pronounced drowsiness, dizziness, confusion, and impaired alertness. Now, other drugs are sedating. Amitriptyline wouldn't necessarily cause a blackout, like you're in, anesthesia, but someone would become extremely sleepy. They would sleep unusually deeply. They would have impaired memory. It would be difficult to awaken. Listen to this, difficult to awaken. And especially when multiple CNS depressing medications are combined. Now let me define that for you so you understand what CNS medications do. Okay, because then that would be added. I'm going to back this up for a second. A CNS drug means it is affecting the central nervous system, principally also the brain and the spinal cord. And a CNS depressant is something that slows certain brain and nervous system activity, okay? Now, going back to what was really found, they did a blood detox. They wanted to know what was in her blood. Okay, now if you combine several drugs, like I said, that have this central nervous system effect, someone could be passed out, could be very difficult to wake them. They won't remember their anything. Okay, guess what was really in her blood though? She wasn't supposed to be on Seroquel, but there was 18 ngml, which is slightly above expected therapeutic range. She had Remeron, 200 ngml, therapeutic level, Lamictal, therapeutic level, Trazodone, therapeutic level. Now, the Seroquel, it was testified that was the only one that appeared elevated. But if Lindsay wasn't supposed to be on it, how is it that it's in her bloodstream? And the combination, okay, if there's 4 drugs in the house, maybe they were meant to be prescribed at different times. What if they really were in that vial? Because that girl would be out of it. And plus, it has to have been absorbed into her system for a long enough time period for it to really be absorbed. Okay, so now I want to jump over to something I talked about earlier this evening. Now that you know a little bit about the drugs that could be in her system or were definitely in her system through testimony, that girl was out of it. Question is, when was she given those drugs? Because if she was not the one taking the drugs on her own, and Patrick conveniently knows everything about it because he was the only witness to it, then what the heck was really going on with the police? Never tested that. Now, I want to take you to something. I started a live earlier this evening saying, how fair is it that this trial even got to commence? Because when you look at how much narrative that Patrick set and how much he set as the narrative actually turned into what is supposed to be facts when he's the only witness to 90% of the stuff that he has witnessed, or that he has spoken about. 90% of it truly is only known by him, and everybody else is believing it. It's honestly absolutely atrocious to me that this is happening. I want to share the list. Okay, so let's say Lindsay's been intoxicated because somebody has fed her 1, 2, 3, or 4 of a combination of drugs. We will never know. The police never tested them. But let's say she did. The interesting thing is her injury coming out the window is called a Jefferson fracture. The way she fractured herself going out the window, let's say she's highly sedated and extremely sleepy and you can't even wake her up. For the love of Pete, this is real, because even when healthcare comes to help, they will report that she's groggy, moving, and then not. Okay, like she is not just, hey, something's wrong with me, I feel it, what's going on, can you help me? She's not moving around. Okay, so very interesting, because she's gone out the window with a head first, and it's created the type of injury that you will usually get if you're diving into a swimming pool, where everything going up your C vertebrae are crunched and they're compacted. And in fact, hers were shattered. So this is quite devastating, that from the one moment in when Patrick is trying to sway people, how convenient for him, because she really cannot talk with this Jefferson fracture. There's no way. And with her purported grogginess and out, I'm going to read you the list of how many people agree with the grogginess and the fact that she's not responding. What happens with this Jefferson fracture is there's 2 things that are significant. Because your C1 has been so shattered and impacted with that impact to the ground, The way that the C1 nerves are supposed to be communicating with your brain to actually function, they are not in communication. That's one level. Second level of hindrance with this is your respiratory muscles that are supposed to be signaling the diaphragm to even open so you can speak, those are also malfunctioning. Okay, now consider that there's two components. The brain is not coordinating well to C1, and the diaphragm is not coordinating to C1. C1 controls a lot of your neck in the first place. So honestly, from the severity of this fracture, this was not just superficial. This was a fracture, and this is how she's become paralyzed. So that's how serious this fracture is. Take a look. If you haven't watched this testimony, I want to recount how many people. Now, this is supposed to start at about 6:10 p.m., where Patrick is in the backyard. This woman can't say anything, okay? Like soft tissue injury, diaphragm's not going to open up so her voice can be, used, and brain's not telling it to work, okay? And plus, I'm saying she's sedated up the wazoo. She has to be, because she doesn't remember any of this. So 6:10, Patrick is the first person on the scene, as you know. And apparently, she says two full sentences that only Patrick witnesses, which are, "I tried to kill myself." That's a lot of movement in the neck. I tried to kill myself. That's a lot of syllables. And then she was supposed to repeat the second sentence being referring to the children and where they were, because Patrick, asked, of course, he didn't know. And she says the next sentence, "They're in the basement." Officer Hall arrived at approximately 6:14. So within 4 minutes, only 4 minutes, and Patrick is still there. Now, Officer Hall reports, when asked about Lindsay's communication, his version: unable to speak, moaning. Within another few minutes, Officer Josephine also asks, and her response to, "Is Lindsay communicating?" She says, mumbling, she mumbled, with no definitive answer. Then an EMS treatment person came on, surname Costanza. Same question. Was Lindsay communicating? Moaning, groaning, no words, no verbal response. Within the same minutes, EMS treatment from a person with the last name Doherty. This is their response. Only partially responsive, principally to painful stimulus. South Shore, by the time she's within a doctor's reach, Dr. McDonough. Very poorly responsive, intubated. Also at South Shore, Dr. Wolfovich. Not speaking intelligibly. This is the same night. By January 25, remember she's intubated. You can't really speak then. ICU on the 25th, critically ill, intubated, later resuscitated. She went into code. By the next day, the 26th, the first thing that she's writing on paper with a Dr. Biswas, horrified. And one of her first questions, where is my family? So let's just go back to the 10 minutes. A 10-minute section of time where 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people, 6 people, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people at the scene within 5 minutes of discovering Lindsay on the ground. 4 of those officers and EMS treatment personnel, 4 of them, all confirm unable to speak, moaning, mumbled, no definitive answer, moaning, groaning, no words, no verbal response, only partially responsive. And Patrick, magically, only 3 or 4 minutes earlier to these people being present, full sentences, full confession. Isn't that convenient? Reasonable doubt? How many ways do we need to count the way? Okay, that's all I'm going to talk about tonight. It needs to be short. I'm going through a few things tonight. I feel really bad for Lindsay Clancy. I can't believe she's been psyched into believing she's committed this crime. And I feel really bad for Reddington. It just looks like he knows this is a humdinger bum rap from the beginning, because it's like going in for a plea deal that you know isn't fair. You're cornered. There's really no way out other than to say, all right, I did it. And a lot of people did wonder if this was part of the strategy. She, of course, had to stick with not guilty. But does she know more than she's letting on now? Because when she came to consciousness, she did have Patrick removed from being in charge of her medically and legally. So, and the other thing that I wonder if Lindsay is psyching us out on, the fact that when she used the phone of one of her doctors, I believe it was Biswas, I believe she called Patrick, and the only thing that he reported her to say, which I thought was so fascinating, this was all that she apparently said to Patrick, and it was the first phone call that anyone ever witnessed, okay? She said to Patrick, I heard a male voice. Now, isn't that interesting that she wanted him to know, I heard a male voice? So I think this is intriguing. We may never know Lindsay's side of this because she is in civil litigation as well with all of her healthcare providers. The list is long and arduous, but I don't have any prediction yet on this. I feel that from what I've looked at myself, simply by an observer watching the trial, as anyone can do now, this is off the charts, should not have come to trial, should have been investigated, considering Patrick already had a girlfriend and this girlfriend's his wife now, and too many things are not clear. Too many things are not clear in this. So I'm going to leave it at that. These candles are burning for the 3 children, Callum, Cora, and Dawson. And I hope there's a hung jury on this, because this is just too much a humdinger to be saying it's as easy to say put her away. This is ridiculous. This is already, what more must this woman pay for? And how does any woman heal from this type of psychological twist in her life? So God only knows at this point. Hopefully the jury are really taking their time, and when in doubt, there's reasonable doubt. So good night. I'm going to say good night for now.